Michelle? Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to give an opportunity for people to trickle in before we begin. So nice to see you, Kathy. Welcome back. And just give us a few moments, and hopefully, we'll have more of a critical mass. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So the good news is that we don't have a quorum, but this is a meeting. Actually, we don't have a quorum, but this is a meeting that doesn't require a quorum. So for the sake of hmm, Kathy, would you be comfortable calling the roll and updating it as people join our meeting? I can't hear you, so you're having trouble. Okay. Do you want to log in and log out? Okay. So we'll wait for you to come back in. Nadine, hi. Thank you. I see other members of your team have joined. We're going to just wait for Ms. Islin to log out and come back into the meeting before we commence, okay? Or can people not hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Perfect. I needed that feedback. Sometimes you have to wonder. So as we are at the very beginning of the holiday season, wow, thank you for being here. And quite a few things have happened today, just in terms of meetings, and we'll be discussing it later in the meeting. But the Atlantic Avenue rezoning had their kickoff meeting today, and myself, Gib, and Elaine Weinstein were participants. So later in the meeting under new business, I look forward to us sharing what information we have. And it was our very, very, very first meeting, and it was virtual, so there's not a lot of color. But prior to that, Ms. Olsner's team is going to make a presentation. And as I said, Kathy Islin has logged out, and she'll log back in. So we have 18 people on the call, so we'll formally begin in a moment. So this is an opportunity to ask, what's going on? Anything interesting? I don't know. I could have Joy saying everybody's mute, but is that fair?
Robert Puka here.
Hey, Mr. Puka, how you doing?
How are you? Happy holidays.
Likewise. All right. As I was saying, we're waiting for Kathy to come in again. And if she's unable to do so in the next 2 minutes, then Julia, is that you on the line, or you're just monitoring us today? Here comes back Kathy.
Sharon, thank you for your welcome back. I have a roster from September. That's my most recent roster. May I use that one?
Actually, it's changed a little bit. Let me just quickly shoot it over to you.
Oh, okay.
Hold on.
You all hear me by any chance? Can you hear me? Am I being heard?
Yes, Quasi, I can hear you.
Your voice is coming kind of low. Is it me? Oh, it could be my speaker. I forgot. Might be me. Oh,
Sharon, why don't I start with this roster until I get yours, because it doesn't seem to
wow, man, what's going on?
be here yet.
I'll go back on mute. I'm
Let's
in
see.
transit, so I'll be listening, okay?
Kathy, have you received it?
Why can't I hear anybody?
No.
Is it me?
Okay.
My cheap phone?
Hey, Quasi, can you mute yourself, please?
Oh, I think maybe I just got it. Hold on.
Okay.
Well,
I think the
Quasi,
problem,
mute yourself,
hello,
please.
everybody, but damn, I can't hear.
Can't hear us.
he can't hear anyone.
That's
And
me
Yeah.
talking.
That's what he was saying. He can't hear us.
yeah, and
I wish it was a lip reader, but I'll figure it out.
I think Ms. Olsner might be having the same problem.
Oh. A software issue. Okay.
Sharon, I don't
Well,
know that you.
I'm gonna mute out for a minute, so let it be known that I'm here when you do the roll call, okay?
Okay,
here.
Quasi.
So
um,
I'll listen the best I can. I can't see get the volume for some reason. I can't hear you well.
Sharon, I don't know that you attached it.
Huh,
See you later.
hold on.
If you could hear them, I'm getting on yours.
Yeah, why don't you just do that?
Okay.
That'll be easier. Although I don't see my face.
What can I do to speaker? Maybe speaker would, does this work? Muted. Can you hear me?
No, they can't.
Yes.
Oh, yes, he can. Okay,
Thank
good.
you. Gib, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Oh, good. Thank you. I had a technical difficulty over here.
As are many of us. Julia, by any chance, do you have the roster? She's not here today.
Perhaps we can just use this one and you can, people can tell me who was added once we get through this one, just so we can get started.
Or who is present, and then we can confirm. Okay? Because I know there's somebody on the line that's not on the roster yet and is trying to earn voting privileges.
Okay. I'm going to just start with my September roster. That's the last one that I have. And
Okay.
if you want to correct me if someone's off since then or not, you can let me know. I have Albert Appleton, Lisa Atkinson,
Here.
Princess Ben James, Robert Callahan,
Here.
Nora Daniel, Ms. Granville, Karen Gray,
Here.
Kathy Island here. Jennifer Jordan,
Here.
Sarima Jordan,
Here.
Peter Crashus. Kaya, I think, has resigned, yes?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, Kaya resigned. Nix Lamel,
Here.
yes. Francis Langley. Sarah Lazore.
I'm here.
Francis, thank you.
Yeah, I'm here.
Sarah Lazore.
Here.
Quasi Menza is here. Mimi Mitchell.
Here.
Fior Ortiz Joyner.
Present.
Is Robert Puca no longer on the committee?
I don't
Okay,
think I voted. I doubt I'm still on, but I would like to try and
Okay.
get back on.
I don't, okay, Robert, I'm just gonna let somebody else track that, but I'll know that you were here. Jack Robinson,
Here.
Kim Robinson,
Present.
Ethel Tyus, Gib Viconi,
Present.
Ursa Weatherspoon, Sharon Wedderburn is here, Elaine Weinstein,
Here.
and Deborah Young.
Here.
Okay, Sharon, those are the people on my roster that I have.
Okay, so hold on.
James is here.
Who's that?
Princess.
Princess, thank you, Princess.
Did you call Mimi Mitchell?
I called Mimi Mitchell, yes.
Okay, please note that Pierre Albert is present.
Pierre Albert. Okay,
And hold on. Michael Francoeur is present.
Yep. Hey guys. Yeah, I was just gonna say.
can you spell that last name? I'm sorry, I don't see it
Yeah,
on the screen.
Yeah, it's FRANCOEUR.
Thank you.
And
Now I see it, sorry.
okay. And Kim Robinson is also present.
Kim Robinson is present.
Right. Did you call Mark Thurton?
No,
Okay.
I'm here.
Please note his presence.
Mark Thurton, okay.
Okay.
Are these committee members or people joining us for the evening?
Kind of sort of both. If they're joining us for the evening, then I haven't called their names.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. Thank you for your patience. Once again, we're going to hear a presentation from Nadine Olsner's team about the proposals, and it's just an opportunity for us to provide for her to respond to any feedback that we would have given her. So Nadine and team, fire away.
Fayanne, are you on?
KM Quasi Mensa, that's me, yes, Quasi Mensa.
Quasi, we're not asking about you.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, do you see Richard the Bell? Is he on?
I don't see Richard.
Okay, should I just go second and wait until they show up? Because Fayanne has the slides.
Okay, sounds good. So the thing
Thank you,
so
Sharon.
what we're going to do, the presentation for the committee, so the presentation coming from Nadine Olsner's group was going to be our item, and we have old business and new business. So we're actually going to begin with the old business, right? Gib, we had discussed you reviewing the resolutions that we had previously passed. Would you be able to come forth at this moment?
Sure, that's fine. Just give me 1 second and I'm going to pull up a couple of slides to help inform that discussion. 1 second. Sharon asked that we review, just to have a kind of a quick review of the Community Board 8 M-Crown resolutions and where that stands at this point. And so if you'll bear with me 1 second, I'm going to share my screen and try to do that. Sorry, just bear with me 1 second. All righty. All right. Can everybody see this okay? I'll take that as a yes. These are the basic M-Crown goals. The idea here is to rezone the current M11 district in Western Crown Heights and along Atlantic Avenue west to Vanderbilt to increase available density for commercial manufacturing uses mixed with residential. We further want to use market rate residential development to cross subsidize affordable housing and manufacturing. The original M-Crown vision included affordability levels based on the median income for Community District 8. We're going to talk about that a little bit, maybe at the end of this discussion. And then tailor the allowable manufacturing uses in the new zone to maximize potential for living wage jobs. What that means is we will look to have some floor area in new buildings in the zone restricted to the types of uses that usually require somewhat lower commercial rents in order to make sure that there is a home for those types of uses. And they're the things that usually provide accessible living wage jobs to people who do not have a college education. This is just a quick sort of spin through the process that we've been through until right before the pandemic started. We had kind of our first subcommittee meeting close to the third quarter of 2013. We adopted a policy for variances in the M1 zone early in 2014, and then had a meeting at which the Department of City Planning expresses an interest in rezoning the M1 district in kind of the summer of 2014. In the spring of 15, we passed a resolution calling for a rezoning study, and then amended that resolution to preference manufacturing over affordable housing. In early 2018, the Department of City Planning presented a rezoning framework, and that was affirmed late in 2019 with some recommendations and then a call for a multi-agency study. Now, not shown here on this chart was what happened after that. And that was leading into the pandemic, we were prepared to move forward with the multi-agency study at the beginning of public outreach for M-Crown, but those plans were derailed by the start of the pandemic. This framework was presented in the winter of 2018, February 2018. It's still the operating framework for the rezoning that's planned as far as we understand it, and that was discussed today at the steering committee meeting. And this framework envisioned high density commercial zones along Atlantic Avenue to Classen Avenue, and then on the other side of north of Atlantic Avenue in Community District 3, with a little spot here. I'm not really sure why this one lot was picked out for residential, but this is a map that DCP drew. This area here in orange is intended to be a mixed-use zone, and this is a place where some of the cross-subsidized light manufacturing uses could potentially happen, but it also provides for market rate and affordable residential. And then the magenta colored areas over here represent manufacturing zones, higher density along Atlantic Avenue, and a medium density south of Atlantic Avenue between Classen Avenue and Franklin Avenue. And the reason that this is shown as manufacturing over here is it kind of reflects some of the existing use in this area. The community board in its well, I'll get to the resolutions in a second, but we had some particular thoughts about those areas that we'll discuss now. So in September of 2019, Community Board 8 passed a resolution that affirmed general support and interest in moving forward with the rezoning based on the DCP framework and ensuing discussions we had. The discussions included some of the following things. One of them were the density and use goals for these subzones. The community board at the time was interested in seeing the commercial zone having a floor area ratio of 6 to 7. That for those of you who are looking for a building height translation, that's like an R8A building of about 14 stories. The mixed use subzones on Grand Avenue and Placid Avenue were intended to have an FAR of about 4 to 5. That is approximately, let's say, 4 is around a 10-story building or a 9-story building, and 5 is like an 11-story building. Slightly less on the interior blocks, and permitting both residential and commercial use with an option of additional preferential FAR for non-residential use, with a portion of that to be used for light industrial, arts-related, cultural, civic, repair, and production service uses. So these are kind of all of the maker and artisan uses that we are looking to provide some additional employment opportunities. Note that these are not part of what was envisioned at the time along Atlantic Avenue in the commercial zone. Later, we had some private applications come in on Atlantic Avenue that did commit to floor area for those uses in exchange for a larger, a greater amount of overall density. And then the medium and high density manufacturing subzones were envisioned to have an FAR of 3 to 4 in the medium and 4 to 5 in the high density manufacturing. In both cases, we were looking for a preferential FAR of 1, an additional FAR of 1 for non-retail use in those areas. Finally, the resolution in September of 19 called for mapping MIH option 1, which was 25% of the residential units offered at an average of 60% AMI. So I'm going to just stop there for a second and ask if there are any questions about the overall framework and the vision for uses in the M-Crown zone.
Hi, I have my hand raised if that's.
I'm sorry, I have my thing in
Oh,
a
that's
corner of
okay.
my slide and I can't see it. So yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is Sarah Lazar. I don't, in one of the earlier slides that you just showed, I think you said that there was a resolution that called to prioritize manufacturing over affordable housing. And I don't recall that being the language that we voted on in our resolutions. I mean, granted, I've been on this committee since 2018. Maybe that was something before my time, but I don't think that we said, I just don't remember the resolution saying that in particular.
Give me 1 second. Let me just get that timeline back up here. Yeah, this is in 2016. So
Yeah, that is before my time.
This was actually an amendment to the original 2015 resolution, and basically what was happening there is we wanted to we kind of wanted to address what was perceived as a greater need for manufacturing employment in the zone, and basically wanted to provide additional floor area and an option for projects that were providing more manufacturing space by giving them slightly less of a requirement for affordable housing. I should mention that these 2015 and 2016 resolutions predated MIH.
Yeah, that's true.
And so what, I mean, the 16 resolution came around about the same time as MIH, but MIH really changed the landscape for how we looked at what could be accomplished through use restrictions in the M-Crown zone. The issue with MIH was that our initial model, which we began in 2014 and then was the basis for the resolution that was passed in 2015, called for 20% affordable. And to get to something where we had 60% AMI, MIH gives 25. So that extra 5% actually kind of cuts into the cross subsidy that's possible for manufacturing. Does that make sense? Because there's a requirement for more cross subsidy for the affordable housing. But
Right, and I guess it's just amazing how quickly all of this, all of, things have changed. Rents across the city have gone up a tremendous amount, even just in the last couple of years. And we're seeing more and more big rezonings across the city where people are demanding much more than MIH in terms of affordability. So it's just interesting how quickly these things change.
And in fact, I'm going to show some data in a second to that point. But before we get there, does anybody else have questions about the framework or the sort of the current state? Albeit, this is a resolution that was passed several years and 3 years ago. But does anybody have any question about what the current state of the board's vision for the area is? I'm sorry, and if you've raised your hand, it's not easy for me to see the raised hands on my screen the way it's set up now.
I have a question.
But right now I'm not seeing. Sounds like Ella?
Yes, it is. Hi, Gib.
Hi.
Hi. No, I'm just kind of curious about the mention of light industry and if there are, specific lots in mind or a sense of how that might be, where that might go.
Yes.
As it seems like there's a lot of private applications coming in still. I wonder where there will be space left, or there's a way to guarantee that.
Well, so basically, since the time this framework was issued, the private applications that have come in all have to be rationalized according to the framework. There has been any private application we've looked at in terms of how well it meets the goals laid out in the M-Crown vision, and also how well it fits within the densities that are described in the September 2019 resolution. So private application does not mean that we don't get the manufacturing space. In fact, actually, what's happened is private applicants have tended to offer more manufacturing space than they would have been required to under the framework in exchange for greater density. That was the case with the Grand Pacific rezoning. That was the case with 840 Atlantic, 870 Atlantic, 1034 Atlantic, all of which came after the framework came out. So the framework, at the end of the day, the framework has been the lens through which the community board has evaluated private applications. And we in the case of the Grand Pacific rezoning, that was Ellie Pariente's project, we're able to get a binding commitment in the form of a community benefit agreement for 25% of the ground floor for restricted use. Along Atlantic Avenue here, and the framework did not envision any manufacturing use in these buildings, but the three applicants I mentioned, 840, 870, and 1034, all agreed to some restricted use floor area in exchange for additional density.
I'm sorry, does 1010 offer anything like that? 1010
No, because
Pacific?
1010 and 1050 Pacific came in before the framework came out. And although we had some ideas about density on those streets, we hadn't kind of reached a meeting of the minds with DCP with respect to where these uses were going to go. So this framework didn't really exist at the time. And to be quite honest, you know, I don't think we were in the same position at the time to demand that the developers deliver on the M-Crown vision in the same way. So those buildings didn't participate in those sorts of community benefit agreements.
It was, I mean, the resolution was passed right before, right after, it was still, Crystal Hudson's predecessor. So, I mean, they slipped in, like, I'm wondering how those buildings on Pacific Street were so easily approved, but I guess that's just history that we have to let go of.
You can't, that's one way to look at it. Yeah, you can't undo the past,
Right.
at this point. At the time, both of them had been in discussions with the city council member for some time. We didn't, as I said, we didn't kind of have the same outline of this framework that we had after August of 2018.
Right.
And so there wasn't the same platform to negotiate with those developers. Having
But it's
said
the
all-
same developer, I'm sorry to interrupt, but like it's 527 Grand is the same Solomon Schwimmer that's 1010 Pacific. So I mean 527 Grand, like I'm wondering what's happening with that because it seems like it's the same mentality of developers that are not part of this bigger picture framework.
That's
It's the
also
same literal developer.
That's also a great question and there are two important points there. The first one is that that developer was not the applicant for 1010 Pacific.
Oh,
There was a different applicant for 1010 Pacific who made a number of promises to the city council member about what was going to happen there. And then after he was disappointed that he didn't get all of the density that he wanted for that lot, promptly sold it to someone else who did not feel bound to any of those promises.
wow.
So that's what happened at 1010 Pacific. Now, 527 Grand is what we call a drag-along lot. It was rezoned as part of the Grand Pacific rezoning, and but it wasn't the applicant. The applicant for Grand Pacific was Ellie Pariente, who's building the building on the northeast corner of Grand and Pacific.
Wait, I'm sorry. Ellie Pariente is the same, was the applicant for 527 Grand?
Yes, not because he owned it, because he didn't. But what the Department of City Planning generally requires in a private ULURP application, by the way, this is some of us on this Zoom understand this material, but others don't. And so it's worth taking a second on it. What the Department of City Planning generally requires not always, but in cases like this one required is that the private application for rezoning has to demonstrate that there's a valid urban planning purpose in the rezoning. And to the Department of City Planning, that generally means they have to show they're rezoning more than the lot they control.
Wow.
And so basically what DCP made Mr. Pariente do is go across the street and do environmentals on a couple lots on Grand Avenue on the other side of Pacific and include them in his application. Now, at this point, I will say that the community board negotiated with Mr. Pariente for, as I mentioned before, 25% of the ground floor in his building for restricted uses. He would not have
I'm
been-
sorry, it's Kathy, because could you, can you also, I mean, I think there was some controversy about those uses. Can you go over those uses that he agreed to? Because I remember there was not general agreement among the committee that we were all satisfied with those, what his commitment to those uses.
Kathy, certainly, but at this moment, you're out of order. Let Gib finish and then Jack Nix, and then we'll come back to you.
Yeah, I'm not,
Just hold on to that.
I'm not, I don't know that it's, so I'm not actually really interested in getting into what happened with Mr. Pariente and his uses, because the uses themselves were ones that had been previously put before the board and actually had been discussed, and I believe were even in the 2015 resolution. But let me just continue here. So Mr. Pariente was interested in additional density on that lot. He would not have been required under the framework to put any restricted use in his building at all. We were not looking for use restrictions on Grand Avenue and Classen Avenue in the MX zone. We were on Pacific Street and Dean Street. So he agreed to do something that he wouldn't have been required to do under the framework in exchange for, basically one additional FAR, and was willing to make a binding commitment for the restricted uses. At that point, the people who were then the owners of the drag-along lots across Pacific Street wanted the same density. We said to those owners, if you are willing to make the same commitments for use restrictions, fair is fair, and we'll consider that for you. They were not willing to make the concessions for use restrictions. They wanted the density, but they didn't want to agree to cross-subsidize the restricted uses. So we said, well, in that case, we're not willing to support additional density for your lots. So although they're not, so again, important to understand, under the framework, it wasn't envisioned that they were going to do use restrictions on Grand Avenue. So they're not doing less than they would have been required to, and they are, and the density they're getting is the density that was envisioned in the framework anyway. So, it was sort of no harm, no foul on those buildings. And as long as Sharon is willing to call people to ask questions, I'm happy to have her do that, because I don't have a very good view of the screen with my.
I'm absolutely going to do that. Jack and Nix, do you mind if Kathy goes ahead of you since she had a question on the presentation?
No, please, Kathy, go ahead.
Kathy, go ahead.
I think I asked my question. I remember that the commitment to the uses was, there was a lot of conversation about it. And that was just my point, that the definition of, the uses were within the categories and the numbers that the DCP and we approved. But I remember there was a lot of conversation about them. I just was going to ask Gib to review those, but I think it's more important that the conversation move on, because we seem to be rehashing a lot of the past. And I think that's more, I think this is with a look toward the future. I think that's why we're having this conversation, so that in the next round of whatever happens in M-Crown, we have a good sense of what happened in the past. I don't really have a question. Thank you.
Okay, I do want to state, though, for the record, the use restrictions were among the most contentious things that we talked about with DCP, and there has never been a point where they have actually agreed with us on that, and it's not clear to me they agree with us today on that. They have generally opposed the idea of restricted use and cross subsidy for those restricted uses on the grounds that they think that they just don't they have not up to this point philosophically agreed to restrict developers. They want to give developers the most freedom possible. So there we've had kind of a long-standing difference of opinion. So you had mentioned that DCP had agreed on the use restrictions and the use groups, but it's that they have never agreed on that.
Correct. Thank you, Kathy. Jack and Nix?
Hi, everybody. Okay, so I understand like the whole beautiful holistic back in the day idea of the M-Crown, but yet again, you all know that we are actually in that particular neighborhood of the M-Crown, and we understand that 1010 Pacific Street didn't really go through because there was a change in hand in the developers, because they didn't get the 11 stories, just the 9 stories. But I would like to just share with you that just a 1-bedroom apartment or a 2-bedroom apartment in that building that's just there is like from $4,500 to $5,000. So all I am calling out here is like that whatever, and I always claim I'm not anti-change, I'm not anti-development. I just need us to have like a more thorough understanding that the M Crown was awesome, but we need to update. And with every developer, and we have 962, which is a beloved junkyard of mine, which is going to become a building, we need to be really by far more like we need to look into that building to become a building where actual people can live in, actual neighbors. And like Gib, you sent like this beautiful article the other day about the AMI being out of order because it is actually a wrong, weird thing that we talk about when we talk about like rezoning and building places. We need, I think, reframe, sit back, and actually look what is needed, because M Crown, Pacific Street, Dean Street, Grand, Classen, Atlantic Avenue have already like prospered, and these apartments are inaccessible to the people who we actually want to serve in our neighborhood. That's all my concern. I want to serve the people of the neighborhood. I don't need more rich people moving in here. I want to serve the people who are here. I don't want them to be pushed out. Like also, like with all the new buildings, the property taxes of small businesses are raising up and there's no support. I keep bringing that up at meetings. Like we're a really beautiful like carpentry shop here that's been here forever can soon, because Eli Pariente is going to start building the across the street, the 1034 Atlantic Avenue that leads over to Pacific Street. That's going to start at some point. And excuse my language, but our street's going to be fucked. There's going to be no parking. There's going to be no access for the small business trucks because the developers will take over the street. So all I need us to do, yet again, change is inevitable, but we need to really rethink the M Crown. We need to rethink the AMI. We need to rethink what's already happened, what already ought to happen, because on Pacific between Classen and Franklin, there is buildings to come. Let's just keep this all in mind with whatever we advocate for, and that's all. I'm really urging you, because I've been with this group now since 2019, and I haven't been there in 2015 with the M Crown, and I like your idea of the M Crown, but I think we have to really revisit the M Crown concept. Thank you.
Let me talk to the question of affordability, because that is really a challenge. And as I said before, I wanted to share some data about AMI and about median income and rent in Community District 8 that looks in comparison with AMI. First of all, I think we sort of have to have a perspective on whether we're moving forward under the existing regulatory framework of zoning and MIH, or if we expect that regulatory framework to be changed before we move forward. Up to this point, we have not assumed, the community board has not assumed that we're changing the regulatory framework, that is making MIH more affordable. We have negotiated with developers to agree to go farther than they would have been required to under MIH. That has happened, but we have not taken the position that MIH itself has to change before we move forward. I don't know that we have the position and the leverage to require a citywide change before our rezoning goes forward. I know there's a lot of enthusiasm, there's more support, or there's been a lot of support for the idea of a neighborhood plan. But one of the facts about doing an area-wide rezoning is MIH will be the lowest common denominator for affordability, and it will not be possible to get, once the neighborhood rezoning is done, all those lots that are rezoned under MIH will have to be the best we can get under MIH, which today is MIH option 1, average of 60% affordability. And again, I'm going to explain why that is not the ideal outcome for us, to reach the people that I think Nix is talking about wanting to reach. But are there more questions though beyond that? Sharon, do we have other folks, or can I just go on to some of the AMI stuff that Nix mentioned? I don't know if you're talking, but if you are muted. I can't hear you. Sharon, I think you're muted. I guess I'm gonna hang on. I'm gonna go on to talk about AMI and median income for a second. I hope this is helpful, but I wanted to cover just sort of in a picture some of the challenges with indexing to AMI. So this is showing this is a graph that shows 100% AMI and 60% AMI. The green line is median income in Community District 8. And you can see back in 2015, when we began the M-Crown process, the median income in Community District 8 was below the 60% AMI line. So 60% AMI, kind of sounded pretty good then. We were starting to deliver apartments at the median for people who lived in Community District 8. But AMI, because it's a larger geographic area, has increased over time. Now you see that median income in Community District 8 has also increased quite sharply between 2015 and 2019. That is an effect of gentrification. And the sharp increase in median income in Community District 8 masks the fact that there are still a lot of people in Community District 8 who are still earning $40,000 to $45,000 to $50,000 a year and are in need of housing that meets that income level. The other thing you see here is that there's a drop in median income in Community District 8 between 2019 and 2020. I think everybody can probably understand why that happened. That's COVID. And a lot of people who could afford it left New York City in that interval. You don't see it reflected in the AMI line because they didn't go far enough out of New York City, and they're still in the tri-state areas. They're still in the metro area someplace, but they're in the suburbs and they're not in New York anymore. So our median income line is starting to approach the 60% AMI, but it's still a little higher than 60% AMI. And you can see CB8 median income came back a little bit between 2020 and 2021, but it's still not back to where it was in 2019 because of the attrition during COVID. So if you look at that against rent, I mean, the shape of these lines is sort of the same, but you can see that an apartment that came out at 60% AMI back in 2015, for a family of 3, this would be a 2-bedroom apartment, and it would be renting probably around $1,100 a month. Now, that's sort of slowly ticked up to a point where here in 2021, 60% AMI would have been about $1,500 a month. The median income in Community District 8 would actually be above that, even given the drop post-COVID. And then there isn't a median income number for 2022 yet, right? Because obviously the Census Bureau hasn't calculated it yet, but there is an AMI number for 2022. And so now the AMI number for 60 has risen again kind of back up to this level. What's, I think, really important to consider when you look at this chart is there are still plenty of people who live in Community District 8 that haven't participated in this rise in income. These are the people who are the most in need of affordable housing and the most at risk of displacement. And since this 60% AMI line is the best we can do with MIH, we can't reach these people anymore with it. And this is a problem, and I don't have a solution for it because, as I said, I don't believe we have the leverage to require a new regulatory framework with lower affordability in order to move ahead with the rezoning. So I just wanted to share that information with you. It's a challenge for us. When we worked with 840 Atlantic, we were able to get them to agree to MIH option 3, which was 40% AMI. And at 40% AMI, we might, I didn't plot this here, but we might still have a line that would provide some opportunity for people down here who we were trying to reach back in 2015 and hopefully still live in the neighborhood. But we only got that because we negotiated it with the developers who had agreed to put it into a restrictive declaration. That of course never happened because the general meeting did not approve that particular proposal. But it's right now, this is where we're limited, basically, when we look at affordability levels. Does that make sense? Does everybody follow that?
And it's also okay to say that you haven't really followed it so you can have clarity for edification.
This is Elaine. I thought I raised my hand. I don't know if anyone can see it or whether I did that successfully, but if I have a chance, I'd like to ask a question.
Elaine, I saw a hand clap, but I did not see a raised hand, so please.
Okay, thank you. So you said one phrase which I hope we might be able to challenge, which all of us, which is that you don't believe we have the leverage. We have a city that, I don't know, every day there are articles in whether it's local papers or in the Times about the number of people unable to find a livable space for a reasonable rent. Everyone agrees that we have a homeless situation that's out of control. Why do you feel does it have to be CB8 that has the leverage?
No.
Prior to rezoning, why can't it be a citywide effort which we then participate in a very loud way?
Oh, that's fine. No,
okay.
there's no problem with that. We certainly could participate in a citywide effort, but if we were to take and hopefully that kind of initiative will get to the city council and we'll have a chance to support it. The issue really is whether at this point, you say we don't move ahead with a rezoning until some kind of a legislative change that affects the entire city happens. We haven't. That hasn't been the position of the community board up to now, and it's a discussion we could have, but it sometimes can take a long time to get that type of citywide legislation passed, and so it's really a double-edged sword. It could deliver deeper affordability, but we also potentially see a lot of displacement that would happen between now and whenever the citywide legislation was passed.
I hear you. I just think that we might have more leverage than we think we do because every major urban area around the country is struggling so badly. I'm wondering if as a group and as a borough-wide group, perhaps we could join together with smaller organizations and just make a lot of noise. And perhaps we just say to Crystal, look, you want us on a steering committee moving forward on an Atlantic Avenue rezoning, but all these rezonings, all these potential developments are stranglehold. We have a stranglehold in that we are terrified of the fact that whatever the rents are will not be able to service the people who are being displaced. It just feels like a rock and a hard place right now. Anyway, move forward. Okay, dear.
Yeah, no, I agree. It is like that. It's like a rock and a hard place.
Right.
All right. So the next two people that have raised their hands for recognition are Sarah and then Mimi. Sarah?
Yeah. So the or the dip between 2019 and 2020, you had mentioned that some of the richer people from the district may have, left the area during the pandemic, but something that also contributes to that dip is also that a lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of
that's-
people, a lot of service workers, especially in Crown Heights, lost their jobs, and also there were a lot of deaths. I don't know exactly how that would factor into, but having, you know,
No, that's an excellent
yeah,
point.
1 in 200 public school children lost a parent during COVID. And so you have a lot of, households that might have been two earner households suddenly only have one, but they still have the same number of kids. And I don't know. I guess I just feel like the affordable housing issue is so much more pressing than it was before. And another point that I think is maybe worth noting is also that 421A has gone away, and also the real estate industry has kind of been on the warpath against all of the gains that were made during 2019. So a lot more apartments are being warehoused, or if they're not being warehoused, they're also being rented out on Airbnb. On this Monday, there's going to be a hearing. The New York City Council is going to be considering a law to crack down on illegal hotels using Airbnb and other similar services. But just in the M Crown area, there are at least 100 full apartments that are being rented out for about $200 a night. And that is not, those are apartments that, who knows, might have been rent stabilized apartments and are being rented out illegally, or they're just being rented out for a massive amount of money. So I don't know. I feel like there's a lot in flux, and I would hope that CB8 would be willing to throw whatever weight and clout it has behind all of the rent lowering possibilities that are out there. Because I mean, this crisis is just intense. I mean, especially when we have 17,000 tenants facing eviction right now without even access to a lawyer, because there are no eviction lawyers available. Anyway, just putting some other things out there.
Thank you, Sarah. Mimi?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Just to piggyback a little bit more on what Elaine and Sarah were saying, we do have some power, some leverage in terms of affordable housing and demanding that the percentage is a little bit higher than is mandated. The fact that developers think that we are only going to follow those guidelines, which I think is like 30%, 25%, et cetera. There's nothing that restricts us from asking for more, demanding more, insisting on more. In fact, if I don't have the address in front of me, but there's a building in Harlem that they actually were able to get 50% affordable housing. And that was because they demanded it. And that was due to the council person and the community board. I guess what I'm trying to say is that things are possible. We can't sit here and say, well, it's unlikely or it's not going to happen. I think that it doesn't hurt to try. And I think that we need to keep the attitude of it is possible. What does it hurt to ask? What does it hurt to demand? Like, if developers want to come into this neighborhood, then they need to be able to serve this neighborhood. They need to be able to respect this neighborhood. And that's actually what we are here as stewards to have them do. That's why we go over these things like a community plan, etc. It's our roles to represent the community. And the way to do that then is to demand what the community needs. And this community needs affordable housing. So if a developer wants to come in here and they want to build, then they're going to have to build for the people in the community, not for the people that they'd like to see eventually in this community. It's about time that as a community board, we put down our foot and we say, this is what we want and this is how we want it. We shouldn't be afraid to do that. We shouldn't feel that we're required and this is required and that is required. It's time for us to speak about what's on our mind and for all of us to come together, especially on this committee, and start to align and demand what our community needs. That's all I had to say. Good night.
So Mimi, it's really important to qualify how the developer got in. A developer who comes in with a private application does have some hurdles to clear with the community board and with the city council member. And that is a situation where the developer can be held to a higher standard. As I said, we were able to get the developer to make that agreement with 840 Atlantic to go to 40% AMI instead of 60. And we were able to get the developers at 870 and 1034 Atlantic to also agree to MIH option 3, you know, the 40% AMI. And those all could have been CBAs that we signed, except that the 840 Atlantic CBA didn't happen because, quite frankly, we were kind of ambushed at the general meeting and it didn't get passed because we had the tremendous number of abstentions. And the 870 and 1034 rezonings were passed, but by the time they got to the council member negotiated even more affordable units in those buildings than we had negotiated. Unfortunately, the council member also removed the height restrictions that we had negotiated. So we weren't able to sign CBAs for those buildings because the height restriction that the community board had passed was not incorporated into those applications. But this community board absolutely has gotten more from private applicants than they would have had to provide under as of right zoning or even under our own framework. Where the situation is different is when a developer comes in as of right. If a lot is already zoned for a certain density and for certain MIH options, the developer does not need our approval to build on it. He doesn't need the city council members' approval to build on it. He can build anything that fits within the zone parameters. And it's important to understand that. If we were to move forward tomorrow, let's say, with a neighborhood rezoning, that rezoning would have to specify MIH, either MIH option 1 or 2, and perhaps it could specify more. But the best you can get in terms of the required specified MIH options right now is option 1, and that's 60% AMI. So once the neighborhood plan goes into effect, everything that's been upzoned is as of right at 60% AMI, and there's no foothold for the community board to negotiate better. None for the community board, none for the city council member. So really that opportunity to get the developers to outperform MIH requirements happens in private applications, not in neighborhood rezonings. It's a very important point for everyone to understand. That's why I say if we were to say we don't want to do a neighborhood rezoning until the entire MIH framework is changed for the city, we could be waiting a long time. And during that, you know, the trade-off there, and again, this is the rock and the hard place, is while we're waiting, people are being displaced from the neighborhood who otherwise could have gotten into some affordable apartments.
Elaine, is your hand still up or newly put up? You have something additional to say?
I don't.
Okay. And I would ask both you and Mimi to lower your hands, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Are there any more questions? Because I would love to pivot to Ms. Olsner's project.
Actually, my hand was still up. I just wanted to really quickly and thank you so much for sharing that information. I would just ask that you and others, when you're going to use an acronym, can you explain what the acronym stands for first before continuing to use it? Just because there's so many of us who are new to this process, and all these acronyms, the FARs and MIHs, etc., can be confusing to other members. That's all. Thank you.
I apologize for that. Thanks for reminding me about that. FAR means floor area ratio, which means, roughly speaking, the number of multiples of the size of the lot you can build on top of it. And MIH is mandatory inclusionary housing, which is the city's policy that in a residential upzoning, a certain percentage of the floor area that's created must be for affordable housing. It's just that the affordability levels aren't all that low. All right, so
Okay.
if that's all, I thank you all very much, and I will try to stop sharing my screen. Here we go.
Sounds good. Ms. Olsner, as you had asked before, I now see Mr. LaBelle in the participants group. Mr. LaBelle, would you like Ms. Olsner for Mr. LaBelle to begin the presentation?
So, Ms. Wedderburn, I'm happy to share my screen. I think Nadine has some remarks and would go through the slide, and then I'll just conclude. That's okay.
Perfect.
Are you able to see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for welcoming us back. My name is Nadine Olsner, and I'm the president of HSN Realty. Tonight, we are here mostly to listen to you all. For the past 2 months, we have appreciated the opportunity to present our vision for the revitalization of 962 Pacific Street. And we are hoping to hear further feedback from you on how we can improve our application and advance this effort. Slide 2. As you will recall, 962 Pacific has been home to my family business for many decades, but today the site is a vacant, underutilized lot. In many ways, out of respect for all of you, because of the hard work this community board has undertaken over the last 6 to 7 years to arrive at a community-driven vision for the future of this area, we have waited for your instructions on how to proceed with the development of our property. And hopefully, the proposal before you today reflects the priorities the M-Crown framework has articulated. Slide 3. We believe, in fact, our proposed building is the model M-Crown project, with nearly 40 affordable apartments for our neighbors at accessible income levels, large family-size units with many in-unit offices for working parents, approximately 30,000 square feet of M-Crown priority uses, including 20,000 square feet for manufacturing and makers' jobs, and 10,000 square feet for early childhood center to serve working families in the community. Slide 4. We have heard some stakeholders state that they would like us to wait and to pursue this proposal until citywide rezoning effort is complete. We cannot. We have been told to stop and start multiple times over the last few years, and the financial strain of this uncertainty is no longer sustainable for us. I am serious when I tell you we must press forward with our application now, regardless of the outcome. We are at risk at losing the property, an outcome that seems to benefit no one here. And after careful examination of our application, the M-Crown framework, and based on decades of land use experience that we have on our team, we believe that the only thing to be achieved by waiting is wasting time. Our site sits squarely in the area that the M-Crown framework designates for moderate density, mixed-use development, which describes our proposal to a T. And slide 5. Slide 5, Richard, thank you. Further, as you can see, the entirety of the rest of the block surrounding our property has already been rezoned over the years to an R7 equivalent. City planning always seeks to have the zoning map reflect continuous, contextual zoning districts. There is little to no chance that the height and density we are proposing is not what the final area-wide rezoning plan will reflect. However, what may be lost in slide 6? However, what may be lost by waiting is the numerous community benefits we plan to incorporate into our building and are willing to legally commit to as part of this rezoning. The city's sponsored rezoning is unlikely to mandate site-specific uses like the M-Crown priorities we are proposing, totaling 30,000 square feet, more M-Crown uses than all recently approved rezonings in the area have committed to in aggregate. And as the ground floor and cellar level plans illustrate, every space in this building has been crafted with community-stated priorities in mind. From the addition of publicly accessible open space, which we took your feedback seriously and incorporated into our plans for the residential garden as recently as last month. We always appreciate your input. Thank you. On slide 7, to the M-Crown makerspace that we have curated best-in-class partners like Evergreen to help us curate. On slide 8, you can see from initial renderings how special this makerspace could become. Slide 9. To the early childhood center that we continue to discuss with a variety of operators, a few of whom we hope to introduce you to early next year, but who already understand our commitment to offering subsidized tuition for local families and to create a home for learning and well-being that uplifts our neighborhood families. Slide 10. To the selection of an outstanding affordable housing administrator, Fifth Avenue Committee, to help us execute on our housing plans. Slide 11. To working with CB8 to ensure that local hiring and supporting neighborhood and entrepreneurship are infused into all of our commercial spaces, particularly the ground floor retail. In conclusion, thank you for continuing to engage with us. We look forward to listening in. Well, we look forward to hearing the conversation tonight and charting a way forward together. Richard and I are happy to answer questions, and we thank you for your time. Also, I would like to know if any of you want to reach out to me, please contact me at 962pacific@gmail.com. We always welcome your input. Thank you.
Thank you. And Nadine, and I would just add, because I think Nadine basically set out everything that we're looking for. You know, the points that were made during the presentation are important, and I'm talking about some of the points that were made by Mr. Vacconi, given the fact that we know that we would have to wait for an area-wide rezoning, and there are certain things and advantages that you get from being able to proceed right now. The first, of course, is that this is one of 25 lots across Pacific Street, which does not maintain an R7A district. So in essence, this does more damage to the zoning plan along that frontage than anything. Another important point to be made is that you would be limiting the applicants here in terms of M-Crown uses. As Gib mentioned previously, city planning has not expressed a preference for such limitation. And moreover, of those 25 lots, none of those R7A lots currently have binding restrictions on them, which the applicant here would engage in with regards to the M-Crown uses, which is an important point because the M-Crown uses are central to the M-Crown rezoning area. And I think finally to note, when you look at absolutes and what you can do on the property, with 150 units, you're looking at roughly 40 units at option 1, AMIs of an average of 60%. But when you do look at the numbers for Community Board 8, one of the benefits of option 1 is that it also carries with it the requirement of 10% of the units at 40% AMI. And at 40% AMI, the AMI for a family of 4 with 2 parents and 2 children would basically be at what the city of New York has deemed to be near poverty level. So what do we know about this application, and what in this entire land use process, which is so challenging, what do we know as an absolute? We absolutely know that there will be families, and there will be families from Community Board 8 who are at near poverty level, who will be able to live in a respectful and dignified way sooner rather than later. We can get these units online. The property, as was stated, is a lot right now. There are so many uncertainties with regards to building a building, but we just know as a factual matter that this property, if rezoned pursuant to this application, will be able to house more of these families sooner. And with that, Nadine and I are happy to answer any questions.
I am seeing no raised hands, no questions. Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering if the applicant had and her team had done the math on seeing whether low-income housing and would be feasible for the site, you know, with the low-income housing tax credit. Yeah, I'm wondering if they tried running the numbers to see if that would work out.
We're happy to run the numbers on LIHTC. You know, I personally serve on nonprofit boards which have a focus in affordable and supportive housing. So we're happy to take a look at that. Yeah, I mean, we can talk to the committee about that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gib?
So I just wanted to, you know, ask a couple of questions just for clarification for the group, and also, you know, talk about what prospective next steps might be. The first question is, it looks to me from the map that you presented that you're not adding any drag along lots to your application. Are you Is that true? You're only looking to rezone the one lot that you control, and there won't be any other lots that will come along with it?
Correct. And in actuality, a small portion of the western side of this lot is actually already zoned to R7A from the Grand and Pacific rezoning. So this is that rare breed of rezoning where you're actually, not only do you have one lot, you actually have less than one tax lot involved in the rezoning.
Right. Okay. The zoning that you're looking for in terms of floor area and height is equivalent to the lots on both sides, which both sort of match what's envisioned under the M-Crown framework.
Yes, I mean, the M-Crown framework, you know, we specifically looked at those prior rezonings and the fact that while those were in the medium density area pursuant to the M-Crown resolutions, which came up to a 4 FAR, those properties were permitted at a 4.6 FAR. And this property would be of similar bulk and height. And we do note that, you know, this property, as unlike any of those other properties, would be, you know, would be voluntarily bound to the M-Crown uses as was discussed.
Right. So I think that's an important point, where Other applicants who've come before us with other projects have generally sought density greater than what is envisioned under the framework. That's not the case here. Here, you're not looking to make any change from what otherwise would be approved, would be likely to be approved as part of a neighborhood rezoning.
Correct.
I guess the last question I would ask is, I think there probably are maybe there's some some various thinking here about affordability levels and what the best configuration for the site might be. I mean, are you willing to kind of pursue that further with the community board sort of further see what the opportunity is to potentially deliver greater affordability by refining the proposal?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just speak, and I think Nadine is equipped to discuss that as well. There were really kind of two separate entities in terms of the rezonings that have come to the community board over the last 5 years or so. You have the Pacific Street rezonings, 1010, 1050, Grand and Pacific, and then there are the Atlantic Avenue rezonings. And the Atlantic Avenue rezonings, they bit off a much larger piece in terms of percentages of FAR and what they were seeking to achieve, both in bulk and height. So I think it's understandable that there were additional financial constraints and additional affordability sought from those properties. I don't necessarily think, and again, I'm not going to speak for Nadine, but I don't necessarily think that our property falls within that category. I think that this property, of the 25 properties along Pacific, between Grand and east of Classen, this property alone would face restrictions not faced by any of those other properties. So I don't know whether or not it's, and again, this is also in terms of Sarah's question with regards to the low-income housing tax credits. I don't know whether or not we'd be able to make a go of it with additional burdens beyond that. But again, Nadine, I don't know if you'd like to add something.
Well, right now, you all know the headwinds that everybody's confronting with higher interest rates, with no 421A, and the other issues. But we do understand that in this community, there is a need for affordable housing. And at this moment, we're trying to pencil out what a deal would look like, because we want to build this building. And you could only build a building if you could pencil out a transaction that could help you get financing and makes it viable. But I do hear what you're saying, and we will go back to the spreadsheets and we'll go back to our team and we'll see what we can do. Thank you.
And then finally, I just want to add that, just in case it wasn't clear to everybody listening to the presentation, in terms of restricted use, the proposal is for what's effectively one FAR of restricted use. And that's so.
Ed, sorry to interrupt you. Please, can you please explain your acronyms when you're using them?
Yeah,
Sorry.
so
Thank you.
FAR is floor area ratio, and that's the size of the lot, basically. So at 30,000 square feet, it's approximately a 30,000 square foot lot, and this is one FAR, of restricted use. Now, under the framework, what would have been sought on this site would have been 0.25 FAR. And that's similar to what DCP agreed in Gowanus for what's called the Gowanus mix, but they haven't agreed to it here. So we don't even, there's no way of knowing now if we would even get 0.25 FAR of restricted use in a neighborhood rezoning. And this proposal is for 4 times that. So it is a significant increase in in community commitment relative to the framework without seeking an additional increase in density. So I think that's and again, the property does not have any drag-along lots, so there won't be any other property owners that are getting the benefit of a private rezoning. So I think those are important differences between this application and the ones we've heard before. Thank you.
Any more questions, queries?
Sharon, I have my hand raised, but I think Jack Robinson does as well. I don't know which of us was first.
That's because you were the upper part of my screen. Since you were the first one to speak, Kathy, I'm going to say you're first and Jack next.
Okay, mine is less of a question than just to follow up on what Mimi said. I think, given the conversation that preceded this 962 specific presentation tonight, it would be very useful for the committee if we could have a small explanation, not tonight, but maybe at our next meeting, of the LIHTC program that Sarah mentioned and that Mr. LaBelle referred to also. It's something I'm hearing about for the first time. I understand that the applicant doesn't believe it's possible to run the numbers and make that viable, but given that we just had a conversation about the dire need for affordable housing, I think Sarah's brought up a program that exists. I understand GIB is now frowning and it would, delay possible, units for people who need them now. But I think the more information we have, the more educated we are, the better board we are. And I think it'd be really important for us to understand that program to consider this application. Thank you. And I'd be willing to do some research. There may be people more knowledgeable than me, but I'd certainly volunteer to.
Who piped up? That's you, Kathy, still?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So it's a low-income tax credit, and low-income tax credits are applicable to distressed census tracts. So whether or not, like in the time of Atlantic Yards, where they said that one of the reasons they wanted to do the development was because the census tracts were distressed, I don't know if that same that same theory could be applied to this. So that's why Gibb frowned, I think. Not that I read Gibb's mind. But certainly we can find a resource that I will post on the land use Google group.
And
In addition to what Mr. LaBelle has volunteered to do.
I also think there should be, time made for us to discuss it and understand it in light of the application.
But certainly not tonight.
Yeah, and
because we're not prepared to do so.
Chair, if I can just add one thing to the LIHTC discussion. I've done rezonings before by private applicants who have sought 100% affordable buildings who are not nonprofit or affordable housing developers. They are for-profit developers who basically sought nonprofit housing and would have taken advantage of the LIHTC program. However, in specifically the case I'm thinking about, which was roughly 4 years ago, that applicant has literally waited 4 years for HPD funding for their 100% affordable building. In that case, it was going to create 200 units of affordability. It was widely heralded by the local community, and they never got funding because HPD has basically such a backlog as far as their funding is concerned. So much as there's a concern right now over the property and the finances of the property, adding an LIHTC layer onto this would likely drive us over any relevant timeframes and push us past even what an area-wide rezoning would require. So I think that's just kind of one of the things to add to the mix.
Thank you, Mr. Bell.
Sure.
Jack?
Sorry, it's Nix again. Jack and Nix, we're married. We're here together.
We understand, but can't tell whom.
I just want to also ask whether the applicant has really been in touch with Councilwoman Hudson, because she really is standing for a neighborhood-wide rezoning plan, and then I feel like we are stepping a little forward because as I know, she is not up for individual rezoning proposals right now. So I would what? So I just would like to put that in the mist.
Sure. Thank you, Nix, for the question. So in answer to your question, we have been in constant communication with Councilmember Hudson, and she's made it very clear to us that she does not support private rezonings. And we have made it very clear that we've got no choice because, frankly, if this rezoning doesn't happen, the property gets purchased probably by an institutional lender or some other property owner. And the most likely scenario involves this going for an M1 use. As per our environmental consultant and prior conversations with the community board, what would be 100% legal at the site and completely within current Department of Buildings regulations would be a last mile distribution center, typically something similar to Amazon or something like that. So you're basically looking at a use where there's truck traffic legally permissible going down Pacific at all times of day and night. And I think that we're in a terrible position and a hard position with regards to this property, and that we've just constantly been in communication with the council member, and we're taking it one step at a time. And our first step is to try to get this community board to support what we think has a lot of merit. And so we appreciate the question. But we do know what the council member feels, and we've told her in no uncertain terms that our hands are tied.
Thank you for the clarification. And yeah, all right, whatever.
Okay, any more questions regarding this? Okay, Nadine and team, I'd like to thank you once again for making yourself available for queries from our community board.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so the next thing that we're going to discuss is new business, and the fact that the working group had their for the Atlantic Avenue proposed mixed-use rezoning had its kickoff meeting today. Hold on one second. Let's see if I can actually do this. No, I can't. As I thought I was going to have difficulty. So I just wanted to tell you about the meeting. It was only an hour long, and its purpose was to introduce one another to who was going to be working on the various working groups. The working groups include economic development, human capital and services. That's one group. Second group will be streetscape, physical infrastructure, and open space. Third group is land use, density, and housing. Elaine was present, myself was present, Gib was present, and Gib, would you like to share the deck? Or could you share the deck? Let me ask that question.
I can certainly try. Give me 1 second. I don't know that, we might not need to do the entire.
We definitely
do
don't
this
need to go
entire
through all 27
presentation,
slides.
but there are some pieces that I think would be helpful for the committee members to see. So let me try to pull it up here 1 second.
Thank you.
Okay. Unfortunately, I have to do this in Chrome here because it's a PDF. Let me see if I can make it bigger for you. Okay. The first thing I think we want to show that it's helpful for everybody to understand is kind of the process that was outlined to us today. This diagram was intended to show sort of a typical Euler process where there's a land use application environmental review, and then the Euler process begins with the community board, then the borough president, then the CPC, then the city council, and then the new zoning is established and development can take place. If you were to look at what we've done to date, it sort of falls all the way over here on the left side of this spectrum. This is what is intended as kind of the process in this case, which has been named the Atlantic Avenue Mixed Use Plan. We weren't actually instructed on how to pronounce the acronym, so I think Mimi will be happy, but I'm not going to try to pronounce the acronym. So this is what's intended here. According to this document, the work done by Community Board 8 and DCP on M-Crown will be supplemented by work, public outreach around community needs and solutions, and then there'll be a set of recommendations that are developed and published, and then the rest of the Euler process will begin. I will say that as a participant, it's still not clear to me what the entire scope of the recommendations will be. It had been described to me by Brian Paul from the Land Use Office as non-zoning public benefits, but the way the rest of it's laid out with a land use working group and the rest it's less clear to me that's the case. So we have to see. This is kind of the context map of who's involved. This sort of speaks for itself. Obviously, everyone knows who Councilmember Hudson is. WXY is a planning consultant that's done a lot of significant facilitated planning in New York City. We know who the Department of City Planning is. Sharon described who the working groups will be. And then there's a steering committee, which is made up of, I don't know, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I think it's probably about 20 members, which includes members of these 3 community boards. I want to say that the institutional knowledge for what's happened before sort of lies with DCP and Community Board 8. There are a lot of people there are some people in the steering committee who've already had some exposure to M-Crown, like the folks from Michelle Deleuze from FAC and Burnell from Impact Brooklyn and Barika Williams from ANHD. But there are a lot of others who haven't had any exposure to it. And it's a lot to kind of take in the time frame that is envisioned. So this is kind of the timeline that we're talking about at this point to produce the recommendations that were represented in that earlier diagram. It looks like I think there's another steering committee meeting planned for the month of December. There will be a workshop, it looks like, planned for mid-January and some working group meetings during the month of January. That sequence will repeat a couple times, and then there will be a final set of recommendations developed in June. I'll go through this, but this is so, to me, this is quite generic in terms of what it says. And so I think the timeline and the participants are kind of the most important piece. I will say, there was a presentation that was part of today's meeting from Jonah Rogoff from the Department of City Planning. And he presented, this is his own timeline and kind of the DCP framework. So this obviously will look familiar to everyone from the presentation I did earlier. He also presented kind of this Community Board 8 work, which I felt was somewhat incomplete, particularly.
You did what?
Hey, Deb,
I'm sorry, can someone mute themselves?
I think it's Deb
Where you
Young.
going this time?
Hey, Deb Young.
Please mute yourself, Deb.
She's not watching. Anyway, one of what wasn't conveyed here by Jonah is the idea of cross-subsidizing light industrial uses through use restrictions, and this is again has been a kind of a persistent bone of contention between the Community Board and the Department of City Planning. So it's not yet clear that that we're free of that from this process. I think those.
Give it to Elaine. Can I just interrupt for a moment?
Sure.
I think it's important for the committee to understand that if you went back a few slides, there was something referred to as working groups. And what I took away, there was a lot of information, but one of the things I took away is that they're welcoming anyone, literally anyone from the community, to be part of these working groups, to contribute, and they will be facilitated large community meetings. And so I think it's important for us to encourage everyone on the phone who's certainly concerned about Atlantic Avenue redistricting, but also those in the community who care a great deal about affordable housing, about infrastructure improvement, about green space for our community, to say you want to participate as a working group, and we'll keep you posted about when these meetings are going to happen. And I'm sure they're going to be well publicized, but we would encourage all of you to participate, because the steering committee is just one way of being able to add your voice to what's happening. Thank you, Gib. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to just add that. Thanks.
No, that's great. And actually, I maybe did not catch the part where they said that the working groups were open for other people to participate.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, I think we should definitely publish the dates of the working group meetings to the land use email list, and hopefully folks will want to join some of them.
Thank you, guys. Sarah, has your hand been up, or do you have something to ask about this?
Yes, I was wondering if the people on this committee who are on the steering committee could share slide decks like this with us over the Google group or the listserv, because this is a kind of thing that would be interesting, I think, for the rest of the committee members, for us to be able to see this so we can, get updated like in real time.
We can check, but I think we should be able to do that. Hopefully we can do that.
Right.
Thank you.
And I think it's our intention. I mean, I would like to hope it's our intention to continue to report back on what's going on with this initiative in these meetings as well.
I agree. In fact, I think that the gentleman that ran the meeting was very clear about, an open process and wanting to involve as many people as possible. So we'll check with the council office to make sure we can share it. But if it's a yes, you'll get it all. And you may not want it all, but you'll get it all. Okay.
I mean, for the record, I did ask Bahij if we could show this presentation tonight, and he said yes, and so here it is. So
Great.
I think I think the rest of the material should be possible as well.
Right.
So any more questions? I agree that it was a lot of information. I'll be working with some people. Gib, can you scroll up to like who is on those the working group assignments from the steering committee? We've pretty much made sure that, there's somebody from Community Board 8 in each one of the buckets, I should say, those who made the assignments, WXY. And we have a fairly good representation of not geographic representation, interests, and advocates. So I look forward to having really erstwhile and robust discussions about these groups. And, Councilwoman Hudson has said that she wants to have as wide as possible communication and in engagement with this. And since people are, frequently have said that it's not, they have not been able to engage as they would like to, here is your opportunity. Hold on one second. Ms. Gray, do you have something to say?
Yes, I just wanted to ask a question. I listened to Gib earlier when he was presenting, and he was talking about developers, and talking to council people, and sometimes saying all the promises and things that they're going to do and concessions. Does that usually come back to the community board so that the community board is aware afterwards what was agreed to?
That's a great question. So I would say that it's very, as a matter of procedure in ULURP, the answer is no. It's not a requirement of ULURP. However, some city council members in particular situations may feel like it's important to have the community board back in the mix. I would say I mean, there's no reason not to, I think, be transparent in this. During the tenure of the previous city council member, council member Cumbo did consult with the community board before making her final decisions on on ULURP applications. In the case of 1010, in the case of 1050, in the case of Grand Pacific, she pretty much went directly with what the community board recommended. She would have done the same thing with, I mean, she tried to do the same thing with 840 Atlantic. So, you know, that was a case where there was a lot of, there certainly was a fair amount of consultation there. In the case of 870 Atlantic and 1034 Atlantic, Councilmember Hudson managed the negotiations, the final negotiations with the developer on her own. The community board was not a party to those discussions. The one thing that's really important to point out here, in response to Ms. Gray's point, is that council members are not able to execute community benefit agreements. As a city council member, a city council member can't be a party to a community benefit agreement as a condition of, you know, a vote on the application. So it falls to another party to be the counterparty on the community benefit agreement. In the case of Grand Pacific, the community benefit agreement was negotiated and signed by Community Board 8. In the case of 870 Atlantic and 1034 Atlantic, the community benefits agreements were negotiated by the Fifth Avenue Committee. I mentioned before that in the case of those two buildings, the final negotiations removed the height restrictions the community board had negotiated. And so the community board was not able to be a counterparty to those negotiations because the final agreement between the council member and the developers was perhaps better in terms of affordable housing, but inferior in terms of the height restriction. And the community board really had to, you know, kind of take a lowest common denominator approach and respect what had been passed by the general membership. And so I did not participate as a party to those community benefit agreements.
This working group that you have right now, is this something that is going to be discussed in terms of how these developers and the council people communicate back to the community board? And also, is there at any time the developer not following through on what they discussed? How do we deal with such situations?
So it's really important. This is another very important question. And the answer is this: the developers are not part of the neighborhood. They're not really involved in the working groups. They're not involved in the steering committees. They're really not involved in this process at all. This process only involves community members, community boards, and community advocates. So this process ultimately is going to result in a neighborhood rezoning that will apply to all lots that otherwise haven't already been the subject of a private application. It's not specific to any particular lot, and there's no developer that's making a case in front of the working group. There's no developer sort of whispering in the ears of people or making presentations to this to this steering committee. In the same way that Ms. Olsner made a presentation this evening. That is not taking place with this steering committee. It's an entirely different process. It's a neighborhood rezoning and not an individual lot. That's a very, very important point. And if that's not clear to anybody, please speak up.
I hear the sound of silence. Okay, I want to thank everybody for their presence. I especially want to give a big thanks to Gib for walking us through something that he has been shepherding for a long time, the rezoning of the M11 zone, and then now taking on, where with myself, Elaine, and Gib are all participating in this Atlantic Avenue mixed use plan. We definitely need a way to pronounce that acronym because it makes no sense to me how that would be intelligible. Are there any issues of the persons assembled would you like to raise at this juncture?
No,
Okay.
just quickly, Sharon, can you just add me to the Google group, please? I haven't been added.
The board does that, but I will make note of that.
Thank you.
And I'll make note to ask that they will do that. And I actually think that you're on the group, but we'll see.
I checked my settings. It's not there, but we'll see. Yeah.
Okay. Karen, your hand is still raised, or you have another question? Ms. Gray?
Sorry, I was listening to Mimi, and when she talks about the situation in Harlem where they were able to get 50%, I'm just saying to all my colleagues on here, let's ask for what we want and not be afraid. And that's just my thought.
Thank you for that, Karen. Mr. Puka? Robert Puka. Robert, your hand is raised.
You might be muted.
And there's no way to say you're Puka, you're muted.
I have a question.
Go
Some
ahead,
of the
Lisa.
build, I know I haven't been in land use. It's been real hectic at work and other stuff, being a mom and being PTA president. Sorry. So I have a question when it pertains to some of these, like the Housing Connect. So some of the properties where they do build, the ones that's not large, I know that some of them I don't remember seeing ever come across us. So do we even get those when they're in our community board? Because I saw one of them on a Housing Connect, and it was in our neighborhood. It's not far from me, and the rents and the amounts that they're asking for, and they're saying they're affordable. It's ridiculous. It's really ridiculous for a family of two, how much they're asking for. And I'm like, do these even come across us? It's just something that was in my mind, that I know I didn't see that building as one of anything that came across land use, but I'm guessing it doesn't come across us for those small buildings like that.
If the building was done as of right, like if it was built in accordance with existing zoning, you're right, it would not come before the land use committee. If buildings at Atlantic Yards, for instance, and there have been a number of buildings that have had income restricted apartments that were offered through Housing Connect at Atlantic Yards, those also don't come in front of the community board because that's a state of New York project that overrides zoning. So you will definitely see buildings on Housing Connect that you've never heard of in one of our meetings, even if they're in Community District 8. In fact, after the neighborhood rezoning is done, assuming, I don't want to jinx us here, I'm touching wood while I say that, but assuming the neighborhood rezoning is done someday, the buildings that come out of the neighborhood rezoning will include affordable housing under mandatory inclusionary housing, but they will not come before this board either, because they'll at that point all be developed as of right. So you just have to keep an eye on Housing Connect. And you will see different kinds of rents on buildings on Housing Connect based on what the subsidy program was or the MIH option was under which those buildings were constructed. Sometimes the rents could look more reasonable than others.
And can I just
not
add
$3,000 for one bedrooms on Schenectady right here.
Exactly,
it was just
Lisa.
These little tiny little apartments, and it's just ridiculous. So I understand it's not coming across us, but it needs to, because it's just not fair, because this is how we're getting priced out too, because these are supposedly affordable, and 2 blocks away from my house on Schenectady is not affordable to have these little 2x4 apartment for $3,000, and you need to have an income of $120,000 to even be looked at to get into the apartment, and it's no amenities, and it's crazy to me. But I'm sorry, I just had to go off topic. That was just something that I don't know how we can't fight this in any kind of way. Like it's so I'm with everybody with saying that we need to voice our opinions a little bit more. It's just really frustrating.
Yeah, and Lisa, I just want to
Mimi,
tack
you're
on to
out
what
of
you're
order. The next person that's supposed to
Oh.
speak who has raised their hand is Kathy. Lisa, are you
Go ahead.
finished?
I'm finished. Thank you. I'm so sorry. It was just a little
No
frustrating.
worries. No worries.
No.
Kathy, go ahead.
Yeah, I know everybody's eager to adjourn, so I don't want to make this too long, but this is something that Sarah would usually bring forward. But I think it would be great for our CB8 representatives on this committee, the Atlantic Avenue Committee, to bring it to the attention as a point of information that there's no tenant membership organization that's been asked to sit in on this committee, and it seems like a gross oversight on the part of the Atlantic Avenue, whatever it's called. But, there may be nothing that can be done about it now, but I think it ought to be brought to the attention by CB8 representatives that there isn't a tenants organization that's been included. And that kind of goes to.
Kathy, actually, both Kaya and myself wrote to the council's office just on that point. And the answer that I got from Andrew was, that's what the working group, we will invite everyone and we want tenants group. And I think that if Kaya is on, she may have gotten a response that they wanted to invite someone, but I'm just second guessing.
Thank you very much to you and Kaya for doing that. I think given what Lisa's just said and many other points that have been made this evening, thank you so much for doing that.
So there are absolutely, though, tenant organizers.
Miss
on
Jordan,
here.
can you mute yourself, please?
Why them don't go?
Miss Jordan, can you mute yourself, please?
They can go.
Miss Jordan, please mute yourself.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say for everybody's edification, there are tenant advocates and organizers that are part of the steering committee. Fifth Avenue Committee is there. Impact Brooklyn is there. ANHD is
And Brooklyn Movement Center.
The Brooklyn Movement is there, and ANHD is there as well. So there are people who have long
But
histories.
those aren't membership organizations.
But
Meaning that
nonetheless,
the
it's
people
representative.
participating are not the people involved or the
Exactly.
people affected by the policy.
Mhm.
I'm not sure that's true in all cases.
It is. It's true.
Okay, everyone. Once again, we've had a robust discussion. We are almost approaching the 2-hour mark. So I would like to thank you for your participation, all that you've done in 2022. I look forward for us to continue to be engaged around matters of land use in 2023. I'd also like to thank Kathy Islin publicly because this is her last month of serving as the secretary, and I believe that her thoughts and her work have well represented the committee, and I wanted to publicly thank her for the work that she's done this year. With that being said, we are adjourned.
Thanks.
Good night.
Thanks, Kathy.
Everyone, happy holidays.
Happy
Happy
holiday.
holidays.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Definitely, like,